Simpin Ain't Easy podcast, where we will dive into the heart of personal recovery, politics, relationships, and business with unfiltered conversations and a fresh perspective. I'm Vince, your host. We are passionate about unpacking the ideas that shape our lives and drive our world forward. In each episode, we'll explore what matters most, challenge assumptions, and spark meaningful dialogue. Buckle up, this is where curiosity meets clarity. Let's get started. Hey, here we are. We're fully on recording. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Great. So just for the audience's sake, I'm just going to introduce you as Dr. Karola Hauer. So I'm going to let you tell me and tell our audience who you are and what do you do?
Well, I'm a licensed psychologist, and I wanted to get there because I myself had a lot of adverse childhood experiences. I had a nightmare to go through, and when I got better eventually with help of some professionals, I thought I want to pay that back. So
That's great. And by doing so, obviously you went in the professional industry and you're now, because I'm a layman, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I always get them confused. Psychiatrist and psychologist. What's the
psychiatrist,
difference?
medication, psychologist, talk therapy.
Okay, so you can actually prescribe medications. That's
Nope,
correct.
the other one.
No. Oh, so you're the other one, the psychologist. And so because of your complex trauma, because there's a lot in your book, and I do have a copy right here, and I took copious amounts of notes. So you ended up writing a book. Talk to me about that journey.
Well, I can tell you, and you know what? It goes back to your book. In my career, I ended up working in a hospital. And I was in the ER for like 10 years, medical floor, all sorts of floors. And I came across so many people. Also, especially with like chemical dependency, drug and alcohol addiction and issues. But what was really important to me was to explain many of those people were actually struggling with the trauma underneath. And then everybody gets upset because they do a rehab or, and we all want to get well. And it's very discouraging when you have a relapse, right? But a lot of times I found that the underlying issue was really trauma and not necessarily the alcohol or the drugs. And so I have a lot of compassion for the people that have dealt with the trauma. And I think all of us have been like through hell and back. So I felt that it was really important to go to big audiences and set some records straight, explain some things, define some things, and hopefully help people to get an insight. Trauma is one thing, but the long-term consequences actually of adverse childhood experiences are specific. I think a lot of people ask me what the difference is between PTSD and complex trauma that results in PTSD.
That's funny because that was going to be my next question.
I knew you would ask me. And I love that. And a lot of people ask me how important betrayal is. And I would say that's the number one difference. Number one. You have a car accident, yeah, maybe there's a person that was drunk, but it's not the betrayal in the family. These are people, most of the people that abuse you, us, are people that are supposed to take care of us, protect us, nurture us, teach us, and get us ready for life. And so when you're in that setting, and I love the developmental stages of the human, actually, and the early developmental stages, because at certain times we're supposed to learn certain things. Actually, we're supposed to work through our complexes or the tension of good and bad, or being, do I feel guilty or do I go out there and am I industrious or not, And I know you and we have taken the fast train through childhood. And somebody asked me recently, we didn't stop at innocence. We didn't stop at comfort. We didn't stop at toys and goodies. And we just were in a fast train. And so there's a lot of things that we didn't even learn. And then, you know what? It's time to go back and learn them at a different place. We had bad attachments. We had fragmented attachment, insecure attachments, all sorts of kinds. But you know what I think is so much more exciting? The self-attachment. It also goes back to an older way of looking at it, and that's self-parenting.
Right,
Taking
right.
care of the self, because after a while, you become clear that you can do better than your parents. Because we've learned a lot.
Absolutely. Well,
Yes.
but not without training though. That's the thing. So
Well,
I mean, because we end up, yeah. And you mentioned it in your book. By the way, I'm gonna the
I
audience can
love
see
it.
this.
Thank
Against
you.
All Odds, yeah. So Against All Odds by Dr. Karola Hauer, a desperate plea for human connection. So in the book, you talk about these tools that we use, or these character of how we uh, develop these tools and these traits and these character. Well, for lack of a better word, this is my word: character defect. Survival mechanisms, more
Yeah.
is what I think how you place it.
Yes.
And so,
Defense
and
mechanism.
correct. And so as we're developing these as a child, you also describe in your book that it doesn't serve us well in adulthood. So how does, a person who has come from, now you also mentioned polyvictimization. Is that am I correct in when I use that term? Is that the correct verbiage, where it's like I'm
Poly-victimizations,
right? And so these are multiple things that happen to you throughout the course of your life, where it's like there's several betrayals. Is that correct? Am I defining
especially,
that correctly?
well, especially complex trauma actually talks about 0 to 18. So birth to 18. The
Hmm.
complexity about it is what I just mentioned, these like developmental stages that actually need to be resolved. In
Right.
general, if you have like a fancy childhood, you should be able to resolve that. You go to your parents and you say, hey, how do you deal with rejection? And the parents say, oh, this is what I do. I didn't have that, you didn't have that, a lot of people didn't have it. So that's important. Polyvictimization is also important because you and I know that it's not just the one spanking or the one
The
blow
one
up.
event. It's
It
multiple
just
events.
goes on almost every day and every night.
Right.
And
So after the ages, oh, go ahead. No,
good, now
please
you go.
finish. No, well, I was saying, so after the age of 18, when you start to get, like, for me, example, for
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
I delved, and this is kind of my more along my, I developed the trait of alcoholism, right? And so and as a matter of fact, I was joking with another coach in my last, and it wasn't a joke, but I have to approach it in terms of like being lighthearted and realizing that humor does help us and laughter does help us,
a
and it's also
ton.
a coping mechanism. I get it. But I was basically telling her, explaining to her that I was voted most likely to be the alcoholic out of high school. And so obviously, after joining the military and being around, I learned how to drink, and it soothed me, although
Of course it did.
at that time I didn't know what it was. And I think that's how the addiction takes root, right? Because I don't have the tools to deal with the traumas and the issues that had transpired,
Absolutely.
between the ages of 1 to 18. So it's like, so when you find this new thing that makes you feel, wow, this makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, I want more. And so that's how my addiction at least began, right? It was just, a couple beers here and there, to drinking, a case in any given night, right? Or, a bar liter of booze, or whatever the case may be.
Fine.
So having come, through those complex traumas, right, of growing up, right, it took a while for me to come to this idea of, my own self concept. And
So
so that's
let's
where, yeah,
let
that's what I was
let's
getting to.
go there.
Exactly.
Let's go
Right.
there. Exactly.
Right.
So
Exactly. Right.
the complex trauma is between 0 and 18. The long-term consequences are as long as we live sometimes if we get some help, no matter from what direction. If we get any help, we can change the course. But it's still time. And long-term consequences, so for example, getting away from the pain is like one of the defense mechanisms we use the most. Now that could be by dissociating, right, and splitting up
Right.
in different parts. It can also be by changing reality, have a distorted way of looking at reality where you, not you, but you plural, always come out okay. This happened because you did this, you did that. And then people do that, and it's very, very unhealthy and sad, and it doesn't give them an awful lot of friends or any kind of comfort. But they have learned in these situations to turn things around so that they are going to be okay. Those are kind of like two main directions. But you're
Right.
absolutely right. Only because the abuse stops does not mean that all of a sudden we're ready for life. We're
I'm glad
not.
you say that. I'm glad you say that because dealing. I don't know. I'm 53 now, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to deal with life. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
But there are parts of life that we're dealing with an awful lot
Uh,
better, you know?
Correct.
And it doesn't mean that we are going to be, oh, we're going to heal and we're going to forget everything that ever happened to us. In some cases, that wouldn't be bad, but it's not going to happen. What happens for us is that we heal to a degree where our narrative doesn't dictate our life anymore. And a lot of people go to alcohol and drugs out of a really poor home, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I mean, you don't learn to drink alcohol, I mean, unless it's prevalent or use drugs, unless it's prevalent in the family lineage. Like we always talk about, it's a family disease in the program of Al-Anon, right?
Right.
It's basically it may not be your direct parental connection, but it could be your grandfather or grandmother who is the alcoholic or who is the abusive
Yes.
one. And even though the alcoholism or the drug addiction may have skipped a generation, it's the behaviors in which that gets passed down, and I
You're
can see
talking,
that. Go
yes,
ahead.
you're talking about transgenerational trauma,
Right, exactly.
where it's
So
handed down and handed down and handed down, and it can skip a generation, but you end up. So they have done a lot of research on Holocaust survivors, and the
right.
children that have never experienced it, a lot of times are very burdened with like specific trauma. They haven't experienced it, but it was handed down to them, and that's the
Well, it's in the
same.
DMA. So can you explain that part of it? Because I know you touch on it in your book, and I can't remember exactly what chapter, but you said you mentioned it like like going into the DNA. So like the trauma and the things that happened to like my grandfather, right? Like he was a World War II veteran, and so the way that I understood it is that his trauma is actually embedded in my DNA, right? And I think that's how like that's passed down from how does that work, I guess?
So I'm not the neuropsych or anything, but I have done enough research to understand that I was always thinking it maybe in our DNA. It's connected to our DNA, and it's the expression of our DNA, how we express our DNA. And so that's where we can be caught in expressing it in the same way like Grandpa did. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it totally makes
but that
sense.
also means this is really, really huge because if it's the expression of the DNA, then I can also work with that. You know what I mean? Because if it were woven into the DNA, it would feel like fate. And it would feel like we can't do anything about it. You know?
Right. And that's where okay, so like getting back to the trauma thing that's inside of what's going on in Karola or Vince or anybody who's
Mm-hmm.
experienced trauma or has PSD. I know in the forward section was like right out of the gate. It says I realized that for long-term consequences of my own trauma, I had been overshadowing every aspect of my adult life, causing me to suffer for way too long. They kept me doubting, judging, mistrusting myself for as long as I could remember. Most of all, they made me feel like I did not have a real purpose in my life. Can you explain to me when you were writing that, like, walk me through that experience, so that the audience could get an idea of like
Uh-huh.
where all of this is coming from?
Well, think about it. So for 18 years, you have like horrendous things going on. You are not prepared to become a young adult. You're not prepared to have children, have relationships, or anything like that. So I was a mom at 19. I felt like somebody shoved me in a dark pond, and I had to try to do what I could. And you know what many, many, many of us do? We do everything opposite from what was done to us.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you
I
because
love
I
it.
know I
No, I
know
know. You
exactly what you're talking about.
understand.
Yeah.
I know you
Yeah.
understand. I
Yeah.
read your book and I understand. And so we do everything opposite. Well, that doesn't make me like a fantastic parent either. Because
Right.
and in the meantime, the one thing that I didn't have that I have today, but I'm too old to raise young kids, is you can't regulate your emotions. So you can hold on for like I would be like okay for like 3 months and then I would blow. And
Right.
then I would be okay for 3 months and then something would just be also because you know what? One of the long-term consequences in for us complex trauma survivors is that everything feels like life or death. You know,
Yes.
something happens
Yes.
here, something happens there, and you're like, sure, you're gonna lose the job, you're not gonna have any money, you're gonna be homeless, you lose your kids, so this, to that, and whatever.
Or the
And
shoelace breaks and it causes you to just go
yeah,
unhinged.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you do.
Right.
Because you're like, oh my gosh, you know, it's so interesting. Somebody just said to me, I mean, I talk with all sorts of people. She said, you know what? I am still afraid to be found out. Found out.
Interesting.
Awesome statement. This is a woman in a
Right.
PhD program, by the way.
Right.
And she's older and she is a beautiful person. And she said, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. I think my biggest fear, and can just still show up sometimes, is to be like wiped off the globe, to not have a purpose, to not have a legend, and to haven't been here. You know what I mean? Because
That
that's
I know exactly. I think that's kind of where I was going. And excuse me for interrupting, but
I love it.
that the whole thing that kind of took me over the edge, or where I had to seek help, especially 3 or 4 years ago before I went into the Al-Anon program, was the fact that I didn't have a purpose. I didn't know what my purpose was, and then all of a sudden, because I was feeding my addiction with narcissism, and then that narcissism turned into self-loathing because I couldn't manage that narcissism because that's not really who I am fundamentally.
Yeah, and
And
it's
so,
just a narcissistic trait. That
right,
doesn't mean you
exactly.
have a narcissistic disorder. And I
Correct,
want to
right.
jump in really fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
PTSD is like a big umbrella with like a lot of like facets.
Right.
And part of those facets are anxiety, depression, chemical dependency. We can have some narcissism, we can have some
Guilty.
borderline guilty. We can have all those things happening.
Right.
We can have OCD, for example. I don't have OCD, but other people come down with OCD. And I know in the world of Al-Anon and AA and NA, a lot of people will relate to that. And then
Yeah.
they call us control freaks. We're not control freaks. We just want to be safe. And
Right, exactly.
we want to know what's going on in our environment.
Want to have control of our environment. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely right.
So I just wanted to throw that in, that PTSD, complex trauma, and all of that, we're all unique. So let's say there's like, I don't know, 20 aspects on that umbrella. And we have certain parts. It also shows up in psychological testing. For example, for me, if depression, anxiety goes up, paranoia can go up.
Interesting.
Nothing
So they're
crazy,
almost
nothing psychotic. It's
right.
just like,
Right.
I don't trust
Like
my
the alarm
environment.
bell.
Well, it
Right.
also happens with the chemical dependency. Depression and anxiety comes up, and the chemical dependency scale comes up in the
Right.
MMPI, for example. So that's so interesting to me.
Explain what the MMPI. What did you say?
MMPI is actually multiple Minnesota personality inventory, and
Oh,
it
okay. All
has
right.
like so many brackets or
Great.
criterias, and it will show you how we score. Yes, that's the
Interesting.
one where you have like the same question, like coming from all sorts of different directions, like a good number of times. But it will just show us there are skills. And so we can just say, how do I react? And we're going to take it to the layman level. When
Gotcha.
I get triggered by something, when I go to fight or flight or freeze or faint or PS, attach. It's so
Interesting.
interesting because now they're throwing it together with fight, flight, or freeze. Sometimes we attach out
Mm-hmm.
of our fear. And we do all sorts of things, you know? So
Right.
we just need to know, I need to know, you need to know, everybody needs to know, how do I work? That's why I like to have somebody on the outside. In groups, in individual counseling and coaching, in whatever modality works. I like to learn, how do I react, and then I can work with that, and then I can start responding. So if I know that my paranoia, just like, what if I don't have a purpose? What if nobody knows I was here? Blah, blah, blah. I can say, well, what's going on? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's where I was struggling, I think, the most when the nihilism started to kick in, and your book touches on this subject. That's why I was really some of the chapters I couldn't relate to because you go really really deep, which I recommend to all my listeners to look at your book because there's different circumstances. But the one after the nihilism started to kick in, then these thoughts of suicide started to creep in, and
Absolutely.
so as soon as like I got to this point where it's like, what is this all worth? I don't have a purpose. It's like, why am I here? Those thoughts of suicide started to creep back in. Now 30 years earlier, when I first entered Alcoholics Anonymous 30 years ago, I was in that same place, right? I was like, what is this worth? And then you even touched on what were the words? Oh man. It's like it was suicidality and homicidality, I think was
Yes.
the other word. And
Yeah.
so it was like either way, like my mental, it was like I could go either way. I could either fly off the handle and delete somebody, or I could delete myself. And either way, I was okay with it. And so that was like when I started to get back after 30 years of thinking that I got past all of that. It was like I knew I needed to get help, and it was a small miracle. I think I was on my couch and I'd probably finished, I don't know, a bar liter of Kraken rum or something. Kraken rum and Dr. Pepper, absolutely delicious, but it'll knock you on your ass. I'll tell you what.
I would be under, I would be 6 feet under.
Just absolutely amazing what I put my body through.
Well, what the
However,
body can actually withstand and
right,
can come
exactly.
back from. That's the most important message.
Well, it's the healing, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Our bodies just naturally are, if we're feeding it appropriately and correctly and are exercising it, yeah, you're absolutely right. The body can heal. Um, that brings me to another story, and hopefully have time to get into it. But getting into the healing part was like that was the part. So talk to me about the societal aspect of it. And I know you talk
No,
about ACE.
I'm glad you're bringing it up because I want to share something that I learned a long time ago. It was like in '89, I think. I was on my bachelor's and I had one of the best professors ever in psychology. And he was an expert witness. And he handed something to us which I still use. And that's a while back. And he put our emotions and how our neurotransmitters work. So if you put things on like a spectrum, on a line, and for example, you put depression on one side and you put mania or aggression on the other side. Depending on where we are, that's how we're going to feel and that's how we're going to act out. Let's take a look at depression. The guy was phenomenal, by the way. I think I remember the name, but that's not important.
Let's keep his anonymity. It's just between
Yeah,
me and you,
yeah,
Karola.
exactly. When you go out on the depression scale, you go through a window of suicidality. When people go further out, they will be so depressed they have absolutely no energy to do anything. When we heal, we're coming back through that window. And that's the time when we really want to pay attention and make sure people are safe. And then when they come out of that, they'll be better. There will, a lot of things will kick in. They're more functional. And there's a purpose, and we have a moral compass, and all sorts of things. When you go out on the aggression, or call it mania, or call it whatever, the higher level of energy. This is a low level of energy, that's a high level of energy. It can get so high that, yeah, we can actually say, I'm just going to get rid of you. And it doesn't matter to me. But that's, again, a window over here.
Right.
So when you go through the window. When you come back through the same window. And I have to tell you, I love to learn these things because they're so practical to me. Like, okay, where am I right now?
So during your okay, that's a great question where you said, where am I at right now? So during your now, was it all professional, or did you actually go to like self-help programs or anything especially when you were dealing with your own addictions, because you had your own addiction
I
issues.
just had
Do you mind
nicotine.
if I Oh, nicotine. Oh, that's a good one too.
It has receptor sites. Guess when I started? I was
I don't know, when you were 17?
7 years old.
Oh, 7 years old. Oh, wow. That's really
That was the only thing I could do. There was nothing else. It was so miserable. And
well, I think it was Ozzy Osbourne. He said that quitting smoking was, or quitting heroin was easier than quitting smoking.
I believe it.
Uh, so because that was one of my addictions that I struggled with as well, was the nicotine habit, and that
So
started for me so that I could be accepted.
it
It was
has
an
a social
interesting,
aspect later down the
right?
road. It's also
Yeah,
connected to chemical dependency. Drinking and smoking and doing these activities goes together. And I would think that I was probably smoking when I was older, also to be accepted in high school. But at
right.
7,
But how did you start at 7? It was just
it
like,
was
talk to me
simple
about that.
misery. It was simple misery. I mean, it was horrific abuse at all times, no protection, no safety. And these crazy people that were, one was my biological parent and the other one was not, when they were out of the house, the only thing I could find, and this is so sad, but it's like, Camel no filter,
Yeah, yeah.
the real good stuff. It's about
That's
the equivalent that I started smoking at 7.
wow.
It was like red
Wow.
hand, Rotende.
Right.
But then I wasn't old enough to get rid of what I had done. So there was like a table that was like for a little train inside that my biological father had built. We still had the table, and it had little tunnels cut out. Because if you
Hmm.
opened it up, it was like a beautiful thing. And so
Right.
I would shove my
The cigarette
the
butts.
cigarette butts right in there. And after a while, I was found out.
Oh no. So,
That didn't make me stop smoking, though.
no, it wouldn't. Yeah, no, it didn't make. After I got busted,
Yeah.
smoking. Yeah, it didn't make me
Then
stop
you just
either.
steal like pennies, and then you like buy
Yeah,
something, and
exactly.
it doesn't bring out the best in you. But yeah, I was 7 years old, so
Well, see, this brings. Oh, go
I
ahead.
did
No,
not
please,
go
please.
to any support groups or anything because I had stopped smoking a long time in Germany, actually, after I had my daughter. I stopped
Oh,
smoking
okay.
there.
All
But
right.
I never had
So,
an hour of therapy because that was for sophisticated, fancy people. I didn't have any
right.
access to any of that. Never had an hour of therapy.
Yeah,
Came over
that's
here.
actually a miracle.
It is total miracle. I
Uh,
came over here. Now I have adolescents, right? I have one that's pretty mild, and I have one that wasn't so mild. I didn't know what to do because you know what? They don't really like you that much during that time. And that was, oh, such a repeat. You know what I mean? You weren't
right. The
good
wounds
enough.
were being we. Yeah.
Oh
Oh,
my
that's a
goodness. So that's,
girl.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, good enough,
that's
the worthiness.
not good enough,
Yeah, I
not
hear it.
worthy, and you're guilty, and you will never do anything right, and
Hmm.
all sorts of stuff. That's when I thought I'm going to go to therapy because now I was here for like maybe a year or so, year or two, and my hair was turning gray almost. So I needed a therapist, and I thought I'm going to take my daughter to a therapist.
Hmm.
That lasted,
Gotcha.
she didn't go. I went in
Oh,
first, and it was pretty clear who was the identified patient. First session. I had a fantastic older psychologist. He was a professor at BYU, actually, and had
right.
retired. And he was my first professional, and he did a pretty amazing job. The reason I think why I
That's
connected to him, he was smart,
right. Gotcha. Well,
you
you're pretty
know,
brainy too, so.
a little, yeah, from my dad and all of that. So I needed proof for a lot of
Right.
things.
Well,
And
vindication, validation, you know, and sometimes a disinterested third party can help you do that, right?
I
You
was
know,
terrified to be found out
right.
because you know what? I was told every day, absolutely every day, I was stupid. I was also, when I was a teenager, I was called all sorts of names.
Yeah.
So, you know, my track was set to not have anything good happening in my life. And so I thought I would be found out. So one day he says to me, "We're going to check your IQ," and I'm like, "That's it, I'm toast. I'm
What, you
out."
genius? Are you like, am I
No,
dealing
no,
with the
no. I
150?
thought I'm going to
Okay.
flunk the whole thing. They were going to find out that I'm actually
Uh,
really stupid.
well,
Because
but that's actually, but that isn't that just a story that you keep telling in your head, right? Is
not
it because,
anymore.
well, right, exactly. However, at that time, though, it was like that was a story that continued to run through my head,
But
you
yeah,
know?
absolutely. Because the people that are really stupid and treat you horribly project their
Their
limitations onto
insecurity,
us, and they call us everything in the book.
exactly. And so, okay, so this is where my reconciliation came with my dad. I didn't need to necessarily throw him under the bus, even though I did speak to, you know, him being a heavy-handed alcoholic and, you know, just having a rough growing up. Nothing compared to what he went through. Most of the stories that I know about my dad was usually through a third party. However, you know, they talk about forgiveness in the program of Al-Anon or any 12-step program. However, I don't necessarily think it's forgiveness that I needed. I needed a reconciliation. I needed to meet him at his level and find out everything. So when you say, you know, these individuals that, you know, place their burdens and their or projecting their issues onto
Limitations.
you and their limitations onto you, I as his son, I absorbed all of that
Absolutely.
unknowingly, but willingly at the same time. Didn't realize what I was doing. And by that, like all of his generational trauma that had passed down through me, but manifested in a completely different way because, you know, just like I read in the book and like we mentioned earlier, everything I wanted to do is exactly opposite of him. However, because of the fact that I took on his burdens,
Yes.
they manifested completely differently. But the same object, though, right? The same object of desire. Like he rode the coattails of the women in his life for whatever reasons, right? Whether it be financially, because he was it didn't read the English language, he was illiterate, you know, third grade education. I went the complete opposite way, you know, got my graduate program, but yet I still required the women in my life to complete me, right?
Yes.
And so that's how the generator and the thing is unless you're doing and taking the time to look in the mirror and do the work, right? Unless you actually take the time to do the work, those types of things are very elusive. So you
Uh,
really have to pull apart those layers, that layer, that onion to get to that point. So when he passed, you know, it was like I could like legitimately let him go, but also feel the burden of the, you know, the weight that years, because he and I were what's the word I'm looking for? Um we weren't talking to each other. I
you
can't, I
were
know
at
there's a word.
odds. You were
Yeah, we were in yeah,
estranged.
estranged, that's the word. You know, we were estranged you know, by the time he passed away. And so, you know, but it just felt like that entire like I had nothing else to prove to anyone else. And it was just it was a freeing moment, bittersweet, I guess you could say.
Yes.
Because in that in that realization, I also realized that he also ran away from things as well, and that he didn't have an opportunity to reconcile things. And the funny thing is that both my sister and I have a half brother in Germany somewhere that we, you know, that we found out at 48 years old is when we found out, you know. So where I'm blessed, I think, is because of the fact that I've done the work and I've been able to reconcile, you know, with that, you know, whereas he was at a disadvantage, he never got to. So how did you get to, okay, so there's this question behind. So when you finally
I knew
got
it.
into your healing, right? And because you had mentioned it in the beginning, but I want you to talk us through it. because you went through and decided that you were going to pursue your doctorate's program. How did you finally get to the point where you were able to forgive or reconcile with those betrayals of the past? Is that a good?
I love it. And I didn't want to interrupt you, and I didn't. But I think there's so much to say about forgiveness. I understand, to me, the spiritual concept of forgiveness. But you know what? Somebody pointed out in some talk, the Bible also says that if somebody does you wrong, you're supposed to like forgive them, but don't go
Right.
back.
Correct.
For me, reconciliation would have been too dangerous because the people that were connected to the types of abuse were all Nazis or
Right. Right.
supposed ex-Nazis, so it would not have been a good idea to go back and do any of that. That wasn't possible. What I tell people psychologically, I like letting go.
Right.
Forgiveness, yeah, you know what? I can cast my burden on Christ, and I can let God be the one who judges this. I am not in a place where I could say, I've forgiven everybody. I can't. But I've let it go and I've turned it over. That's the best I can do. I mean, if you are being like used as a sex object and handed down from neighbor to neighbor and friend to friend, how do you forgive that? But I refuse to let this rule my life. And so I just gave it to the authority for me, and that would be God. And that's what we're actually asked to do. And the rest is not up to me. You know?
See, that's. Go ahead. No, please finish.
And here's the thing, I have seen many people who in the course of the family life, you know, somebody passes away and then they're forced to have to forgive and the family is waiting for it. I wouldn't want anybody to be forced to do that because it's such a personal thing. And so many people come in and say, well, I have forgiven the person, but it keeps me awake, right?
So you swear you've never been to a 12-step program?
I swear.
You swear? Okay, because
But, you know, I work with a ton of people who are going to it.
yeah, that okay, so that makes sense.
No. And
However,
as a professional intern, I have been to 12-step programs.
so you had to visit them, but the funny thing is because you mentioned the Bible, and what the Bible says is like you're supposed to forgive, but you can't go back. All right. However, there in 12-step programs, our ninth step says, make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so. This is the second part, except when to do so would injure them or others. And others also includes
Or
yourself.
yourself.
Right. And so, going back and to try, I mean, I didn't know what my father's state was. And after, because even when I was too big to be physically abused, right? It was like there was still this like this mental abuse that kept going back and forth. And
Sure.
I don't know if that was just like ignorance on his part. Again, I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, just maybe his lack of understanding or his
Right.
inability to heal himself. But it was like even when I tried to put myself out there and try to do the Christian thing and put my, turn the other cheek, so to speak, I constantly just got slapped over and over and over again,
You
metaphorically.
still get knocked down.
Right.
So
And
I'm
so
not
at some
turning
point in
the other
time,
cheek.
right, at some point in time, I just got tired and I was just like, I just got to turn my back and walk the fuck away. Right. And so I think that's a good point that you bring up because there are some people that will be, regardless of whatever good faith you have, they will not come forward well intentioned. And I think that's an important thing that people need to understand when you're going through your own recovery journey, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
in essence, I mean, your path was a recovery journey, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay. On the topic of suicide, right? I know this is a dark program, but you deal with some really heavy shit. And I know that you
No,
have a really amazing story about a lady. You've told it to me once, and hopefully we'll have time to get to that. But here's one of the lines, and there's a couple of them actually. And this is chapter 3, right out of the gate. Sadly enough, for those of us who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, our long-term effects include severe depression and anxiety, which you've mentioned, sustained fight or flight mode, right? Struggles with addiction, overall complicated lives, and dealing with passive or active suicidal ideations. We've discussed that. Instead, and then we skip a couple of sentences and it says, instead, suicide is a backdoor of sorts, a means to exit an incomprehensible situation and seemingly the only thinkable way out. Now, we've talked about suicidal ideations, but what I'm more so wanting to get into is like, how did you get away from that? Right? How did you personally get away from that, and how does that translate into the work that you're doing now? Because I remember a story that you told me. It was last ski season, I think. Uh, and you told me an interesting story about an individual who was hospitalized that you were talking to. You don't have to disclose their
No,
their.
I will
Yeah.
never do that.
But
But
anyway, so
yeah,
all right,
I can
go.
share the stories. Suicidal ideation, the sentences that you skipped, I just want to, I think what is in
Mhm.
between is that so many people, and by the way, I need to disclose first that I do not recommend suicide to anybody. And if
No,
we can
no,
stop
neither do I.
anybody, we will do anything we can. We want you to reach out for help.
And I think
But
that's why I am doing this podcast, is to help
I know
people who have been troubled just like you and I.
what people are so shocked by is, why didn't they reach out to me? They didn't love me. I don't think that's true. So God works in the mysterious ways. I had to overcome my suicidality. Constant as a backdoor. When I describe it as a backdoor, it doesn't seem so horrible to you as a child and adolescent or young adult, because it feels like it's a backdoor because the abuse will end one day. And if it's when I die, that'll be the end of it. So sometimes children can romance the idea, and we need to pay really, really good
Yeah,
attention to that. We need to listen to
especially
that,
kids. Yeah.
and we need to point out so that's a very, very permanent thing that doesn't solve anything. And so when I say God works in mysterious ways, He sends me to work at a hospital, and for 10 years I worked with people who have suicidal ideations, who attempted to commit suicide, or who die of suicide, and then I deal with the families. So, and by the way, commit is not a great word. It's not that we're looking at it as a crime. It's an action, and it's
It's
a
an attempt.
desperate action. So
Right.
I spent more time in the hospital explaining most of the time to the support team and family. Number one, the person who went through the suicide attempt is the one who is mostly traumatized. End of discussion, period. They cut, they do all sorts of things. Trust me, there's huge trauma in it, especially if they don't have recall planning it. And I had a couple of people who had absolutely no recall. They asked in the hospital, why am I here? And the people look at
Did
them.
they black? Were they okay? So I got to ask: were they blacked out? Were they drunk? Were they under the
They were
influence? I mean,
neither drunk, they were in deep despair with some life decisions.
wow.
One woman's husband was just given notification that they can't help him anymore. I mean, she was in love with this guy. It was the most beautiful couple.
I
And she reacted in a way that she
right.
did not recall. The
I
other
just
one may
so
have
is that
blacked
like
out.
is that a survival mechanism in the brain, not realizing that, oh geez, I'm about to kill myself, and it's just like, I mean, is there
That's a
like a switch turning on and off? I mean, I that's just an interesting concept that you know.
I I would probably go more to dissociating, zoning out,
Gotcha.
stepping out, and part of you takes over.
Right.
And that's not a scary thing, and that doesn't mean we're all multiple personality or now called dissociative identity disorder. But many of us who have been traumatized or fragmented, we can have a side that is pretty bold. We can also have a side that's very nice. We can also have a side that confronts things. We can also have a side that's avoidant. We can have a lot of like aspects. I like to look
Right.
at like a crystal and look at all the facets.
Right.
Just like we were talking about the umbrella for PTSD.
Right.
So depending where I am, so we call it levels of consciousness, ego states, fragments. We could call it whatever we call it. But I believe all of us trauma survivors at one point or another have been told by other people that we can have different faces. That doesn't mean completely different and nobody can recognize it, but we can be very gentle, we can be very kind, we can be also pretty harsh, we can do all sorts of things. And so we turn sometimes a little bit, right? Depending on what has happened, that comes forward. And so my thoughts about it is that they probably zoned out. Because if you black out, you can't take action. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
blackout in the sense where you're like unconscious on the
Like
ground.
right, unconscious, right? Yeah.
So I would say probably it may be a dissociative move, but most of it happens when you're completely overwhelmed. So people can, for example, they come into the hospital and trauma happened in their family and they don't remember the name. We had a pastor at a hospital that I used to work with. We had psychology versus religion, our group. He went to our hospital. He was a VIP, and he for 24 hours in a fugue had no idea who he was, where he was coming from. But he also had a very, very devastating situation at home. So a lot of
Interesting.
times when people are very overwhelmed, that's when we want to pay really good attention. My first thing is damage control. Keep your feet on the ground. Who can you trust? Who can you reach out to? And in our self-attachment, what do I know about myself that actually helps me? That actually helps me redirect. That actually helps me. If I don't know what my purpose is right now, I don't want to go down that slide and stay on that
Right.
topic. That doesn't mean I'm going to be over here and I'm going to tell myself what wonderful purpose I have. It just means we're going to do damage control. Because that moment of suicidality, like I talked about this window,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time passes. If we're absolutely stuck in there, I worked in a mental hospital, I worked in a crisis stabilization unit, that's where you should go. Because what you do there as a professional, you keep people safe.
Right. Right.
Number one goal.
And there are suicide hotlines and whatnot. I mean, we don't have to get
Suicide
into all of that.
hotlines and
Yeah,
all of
but
that.
there
Exactly.
are places to
But
go. Yeah.
reach out somewhere if you can and have a support, have an idea. If I get into the dark place, who can I reach out to? That helps a lot.
So so now for me, when when I was feeling that nihilism and I had a brief God shot that said you need to get to an AA meeting. The way that literally said AA meeting in my head. You know, what now it was somebody, it was a Holy Spirit, it was God, was Jesus, whatever it was, it's just I needed to get to an AA meeting. So I found an AA meeting, it was late at night, and I went. The message that I got now, the message that I got out of that, besides going to the AA meeting, was that I was also isolating myself,
Yes,
and that isolation is what kept me from. It's like it became almost like this was my prison, right? And so
yes,
but once I actually escaped and took that small step out, Jordan Peterson talks about 12 rules for life, an antidote to chaos, and he talks about the small step of making your bed. Well, for me at that point in time, that small step was just being able to step outside of the house
absolutely.
and then doing the next right thing. So on your now on a healing journey, when you get somebody who needs, I mean, what are some of the recommendations that you would make to try to get them to see the brighter side of life? Like I want to kind of pivot this from being so dark, and I want to try to get from the hurt to the healing. So how what would be like if somebody came into your office? It's like, how do you begin that healing journey?
First things first. Somebody comes to my office, they have my respect. They are human beings. They deserve the best treatment. And when people experience that, and that doesn't mean I'm a superhuman or anything like that, but I have a deep, deep respect for humanity, really. And I also realize that not all of humanity is as respectful as we wish it would be. But I just have this like innate feeling and attitude that there's a child of God sitting across from me. And
Right.
I'm here to, I'm a tool. I mean, yeah, I've studied and all of that, but I'm being
No,
used as a tool,
I've been called a
and
tool a couple of times in my life too.
you know what? And I'm good with that. So in depth psychology, and you know, Carl Jung actually said something so amazing. He said many, many amazing things. But one thing I really, really love, he talked about the third in the room. It's me, it's the patient, and it's the third.
Right.
Whatever that is for
The
us.
higher power, so to speak.
Higher power, God,
Right.
spirit, universe, whatever that is, there is a third in the room. And to be aware of that, and to just keep that in the forefront. The other thing he also said, I got some really simple messages. They were so powerful in my graduate school, which was probably life saving. He also said, learn everything there is to learn. And when you go into the room, forget everything that you have ever learned. And I love that because, like,
That's interesting. Yeah, it keeps
what's
the
good
ego.
for you is not
Right.
good for the next person or next person or the next person.
Right. Well, the recovery journey is unique to the individual themselves, and
Yeah.
I do want. There's a couple of things I want to touch on here. I'm going to get to the reason why I got this is part of chapter 5, the stages of recovery. That's why I was trying to lead into that. But I'm glad that you mentioned a third in the room, because on page 64 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a quote, and it says, especially when it comes to attitudes, because we talked about homicidality, suicidality, and whatnot. It says, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics. In this case, anybody who's got any type of dysfunction. But resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper, right? This would be considered our fourth step. We listed people and institutions or principles with whom we are angry, and we asked ourselves why we are angry. In most cases, was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, and our personal relationships. So in that, it's like when you say the third in the room, it's like when you bring in God, and in my book, I even mentioned it. It's like you have to bring something in your life that's going to keep you spiritually accountable. And there's just that absolute important part of it. And so this is kind of a segue into your book. Uh, our thinking, well, it's like, well, I'll just go ahead and read it. It says, in our black and white world, it was always been all or nothing, right? It was always black and white thinking, right? For as long as we have lived, eventually our past negative experiences will gradually be less and less capable of haunting us in the way they did for way too long. So getting back to what I was saying in regards to the journey, it's like how do you help your customers, clients, patients, if you will, um, transition from that black and white, all or nothing. Because as an alcoholic, and believe me, and even an al-anon, I don't really differentiate the two. Only one is wet and one is dry, because the thinking and the mentality is absolutely the same. How do you transition, and how do you get them to broaden their scope instead of removing the blinders, so to speak?
Ah, there's so much to say about it. So,
I
first of
know.
all,
That's why I asked.
first of all, first of all, to me, it's respect. I don't see myself as the expert, and the other person is like this low person. We are two people who are trying to work together and are trying to help. For me, I'm coming from the medical model. I call it patients. I'm trying to help the patient to see themselves in a different light and to gain tools that they never had. or sharpen them. P.S. I want to say something really quick about defense
Sure.
mechanisms. And don't
Absolutely.
let me wander off. Get me right
All
back.
right.
But I want to say something about defense mechanisms. We're not trying to get rid of our defense mechanisms. We're trying to modify them. If dissociation or zoning out has helped me, it comes in helpful every once in a while, but not in like important situations and
To
not,
tune out the noise, I got it.
yeah, you tune it out and you're like, oh. Or
So,
anything. Now, I'm not talking about the alcohol, but like you said, so sometimes withdrawal is not the worst thing in the world if I do it all the time. So I can be very quiet. I have my alone time. I love my alone time. I can
right,
also go out and like entertain a whole auditorium and make them crack up. But I like to have the choice.
right.
And I'd like to know when it's time for me to just go inside, to slow it down, to calm down. And so I just want to make sure don't get rid of all the defense mechanisms
Well,
because
I
when we
think
dial them down
right.
and use them and modify them, they can come in handy.
Well, in the program, there's the defense mechanisms, we call them character defects, right? And for me, like during my fourth step, it seemed that all of my character defects really stemmed from the root of fear. Like you said, fight, flight, and I was the one that usually either shut completely down and disassociated and didn't want to have any interaction with anybody and just turn my back and walk away, or I would fight, and there was no in between that black and white thinking, getting back to it. So it wasn't until I started to realize that, oh wait, maybe if I like leverage the tools, like for example, I'll use a work example for it.
Mhm.
If I get a nasty gram or a nasty email for somebody, or an email that may be perceived as being nasty, maybe there is no ill intent behind that email. However, something that may come across, and right away it just like hits me in the gut. My defensive mechanism kicks in, and I
Oh,
just want to go off and start, keyboard warrior and start to attack, and that might not necessarily be the case, right?
okay.
So in the program, we learned this acronym, pause, right? Postpone action until serenity emerges.
I love it.
Sometimes that may be 24 hours, or if it comes in on Monday, it could very well wait all 96 hours until Friday until I respond. But
I agree.
not until I have. So these are some of the tools, and that's I think what I'm getting at is with the black and white thinking. What
Well,
tools do you provide some of your folks?
this would so the steps actually in the psychology. The
Mm-hmm.
first one is we're poor. It's comfort. We're okay with each other. The second one is safety. I mean, obviously the office always is always safe.
Right.
So the first step is that I know that you are going to be taken care of at home, that you have some type of resources, that you're not going to hurt yourself and all of those things, right? Then we're going to go into the next, especially for complex trauma survivors, then we're going to work with like the things that have happened. Now, while we're doing that, my job is to model. My job is to throw out tools. My job is to observe. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I pay total attention to your words. And if I use a word, it's not because I'm criticizing you, but it just made me think about something. And
Right.
I might interrupt for a moment, and I will clarify that immediately. The only reason why I interrupt is because I want to get something across I think that will help you. And I don't use
Gotcha.
that all the time. So just this way that we are dealing with each other, that we work on allowing the serenity to emerge again, is like we don't want to react, we want to respond. It's a little bit of
Right.
different wording, but we're doing the same thing, my
Well,
opinion.
reacting is usually for me the way I take on that word react is that initial gut feeling that I get, or that sting, right? It's like, why did this particular situation like sting so bad or hurt so? Why do I have such a visceral um like
Reaction to it,
attention reaction to it, right?
right?
Whereas like I that pause, that acronym that I said, that kind of gives me a minute to just like say, all right, well, obviously this happened to me. So it gives me an opportunity to reach out to God and give him an opportunity to say, all right, God, why did that one hurt? And typically it leads me back to the guy in the mirror, right? And so now I have to investigate that event or whatever. And once I started investigating what's going on, like, is it a part of my ego that's being attacked? Are they attacking my talent, my skill set, whatever? And even when it's just like, even if something as trivial as an argument with, somebody face to face, or, getting into an online debate, it's
Right.
usually, it's like, I may just like step back for a few minutes and actually look at the words and figure out, okay, well, why did that hurt? And then come back and try to turn it around, not necessarily turn it around to cause pain, but to turn it around so that both parties are thinking more in line with what the conversation, more like a Socratic conversation. So when this horrible email comes to me at work, like I said, it may take me 96 hours to respond. However, there's going to be a series of questions that are going to be involved so that we can get clarity instead of just reacting and just going,
Right.
nuts.
We
So,
may not have the 96 hours in many situations. I give myself a
oh, that's a
24-hour rule.
luxury. No, that's a
Exactly.
luxury.
I
Yeah,
give
yeah.
I give myself, and I share with people, 24 hours at minimum. Sleep on it, think about it, breathe into it, take a look around, and see, and damage control always, you know.
Okay, so what do you mean by damage control? Talk to me about damage control.
Don't hurt anything that you don't want to hurt. Don't hurt
So avoid
yourself.
cleaning up on aisle 7. Meaning doing the next right thing, and maybe
Yes.
maybe the next right thing may be doing nothing. In essence.
Sometimes that's
Right.
exactly what it is. And then people say, well, how do you do that? I say, you know what I do? I take a lot of deep breath.
Right.
And when you
Meditation.
take a breath in, you will not act out.
Correct. Right.
Anger management, we teach that all the time. Breathe, get connected to the earth, even though we may be on concrete and wood and whatever, we're still connected to the earth. So really stay grounded and get your whole body involved. Get your body involved in the sense of that it can back you up. So body and mind together is another really huge step. Many, many, many people who have been through a lot of trauma have disowned the body. They're not talking to the body anymore. They may feel
Right.
betrayed. The body may feel betrayed, blah, blah, blah.
Well, the
It's
abuse that
so,
we put our bodies through, right? I mean, and that
right.
manifests in all manners of addiction: nicotine, alcohol, food,
Anything.
sexual addiction. I
Yes.
mean, it's like, it's all about taking care of your temple, right? And that's one of the things that just blows me away. It's like, I completely neglected myself for years. I mean, 260 pounds, overeating. Uh, you know, uh, I mean, talk about addictions. It was like, eating McDonald's 3 times a day, number two meal with a fillet of fish and an extra large exercise meat Coke and fries. It's like just constantly shoving garbage down my throat. And then I was wondering why I felt like crap all the time. Right.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I
No, I
interrupted, but I
like
just
it.
related so
So,
much with.
so all of those things in the course of our therapy, I mean, we're offering different ways of looking at things. I mean, I simply have credibility because I have been through this. That doesn't mean everybody has to have been through a nightmare of trauma, but it helps.
Right.
And people say, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm like,
You're
yeah, I do.
relatable. You understand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If I
Yeah.
say I'm afraid to be found out, people go, been there. I'm afraid to be wiped off the globe.
Yeah.
Been there many, many years. You know what? It's not that I really want to kill myself, but I would, and then I finish the sentence, but I would love to go to sleep and not wake up.
Right.
But been there many times.
Yeah.
Been there many times. So, you know what? It's like, okay, so it happens in a relationship. I think the relationship for you, your culture, is hugely important. As you're going through your meetings and as you're growing in those relationships with others, and as you're learning from each other, we get something really, really important. Somebody cares about us, and we get to care about other people. And it's an exchange that is not abusive. It's a lot of modeling, you know. It's finding different solutions that people have never thought about. That doesn't mean I'm so smart or anything. I'll just have metaphors pop in my head and say, you know what I experienced today? And then I will use that. For example,
Right.
One popped up when you asked me what's the way of getting healing. The first time I was in Hawaii, I had to snorkel and I had to go down to the seafloor, right? It was only like 10, 12 feet or something. I was all excited. I went all the way down and I looked up and I will never forget what I saw. I saw, obviously, the top of the water, and then I saw these sun rays coming in, like a whole handful, and they
Yeah, I
hit
know
the
exactly.
floor. They hit the sand.
Uh-huh.
And I was just kind of sitting down there in the sand, looking up, and I said, that is probably how our psyche opens up. Because psyche opens up, soul, psyche, core, whatever you want to call it.
All
When
right, I'm following. I'm tracking.
when we go and get any type of help, it goes, oh, how about this one? How about that one? How about this one? How about
Right.
that one? But this is the regulator. The person's psyche is the regulator. I'm not going to go and dig and shove and do anything. But if it shows up, I'm going to look at it. And that's another one. I never had anything like that happening in my earlier life where somebody was honoring what was going on inside of me.
Right.
I mean, you'll be in the brick wall if you say anything. But it's so important I feel, to be in tune and to listen well and pay attention and to always be open-minded and curious, because I will always learn from everybody I talk to. I've learned from you. I learned things tonight. Pause. I love that. I'm going to use that.
Text me. If you need a reminder, text me. I
Yeah,
got
I
a whole
will.
bunch of them. There's another good one. We mentioned ego when we mentioned ego, right? Earlier, there's a good one for that one. It's edging God out, right? So as soon
Wow.
as my ego gets involved and I want to take control of something, I know that's we talked about giving it up to God, right? And it's
Yes.
like, yeah, edging God out. And there's another great one, couple of them. It actually has 4 or 5 of them. I'm not going to remember, but fear could stand for fuck everything and run, or it could stand for face everything and recover.
I love it.
Right. So there's a whole bunch of them. I'll share them with you. No problem. You can use
I
them.
love it.
They're not.
But
They're not mine. They're not mine. They're
I
not
know.
mine to. They're only mine to give away. Right.
I know.
Because I learned these through the
I just
program.
want to specify something really quickly. Both of us have
Sure.
talked about God, and AA definitely has higher power. It's not for me to impose my belief or whatever onto anybody. And
Correct.
that's
Right.
hugely important for me. So whatever people believe in, I'm just going to go with that. I'm not the person who thinks there's only one way of doing that. There's 8 billion people on the globe, and there's probably as many ways to recovery from trauma, from the side effects or the long-term consequences of trauma, So it's just really important that we just really honor the person and get
Well,
them.
correct. Well, I mean, you and I both believe in Jesus. So I mean, I could get that. However, you're absolutely right. Their recovery journey is, like we said earlier, we mentioned earlier, their recovery journey is unique to them. And so, whatever spiritual, in the book, I even said something along the lines, it's like, get something that's going to hold you spiritually accountable. And I made the joke of, get Jack in a Box as your higher power, but have something bigger than yourself that can help you through this. Although Jack in a Box isn't recommended.
Yeah. I want to say something really quick. I have a
Yeah, sure.
really amazing story about somebody who was in the program of AA for over a decade and
Uh-huh.
doing actually very well, but had complex trauma. And in this complex trauma, the family was horrendous. But guess where they went every Sunday?
Jack in a Box.
No, church.
Oh.
And it happened to be a special faith where you put your hand into the water and you put it on your
Right.
forehead, right?
I
And he
gotcha.
said to me, I never wanted to stick my hand in there because I wasn't sure what that water is going to do to me. I mean, these people were proclaiming all sorts of things on Sunday, and Sunday afternoon looked different, and Monday morning looked different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that person has a really hard time with God, higher power, or whatever.
Right.
And so he had like a tough time. He is an amazing guy. I love working with him and the family. And somebody in AA said to him, well, maybe your God is not big enough. And I'm like, dude,
He
what
needs to
kind
get a new sponsor if his sponsor
Yeah, it
told him
wasn't
that.
his.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
actually, it was the sponsor that he chose after like 10 years or something. He had other
Yeah.
sponsors in between. But I just want to say therapy in 12-step programs, we don't have the right to say that to anybody.
No, we
I don't
don't.
have the right.
And the thing is every 12-step program, these are recommendations. There's no shoulds, because shoulds, those are all shaming words. You should be doing this, or you should be doing that, or that's complete that's bullshit. Yeah, no,
And
I wouldn't agree with that.
we
No,
don't do
with
that,
my
and I
spon
don't either. At one
with my
time I spoke to
sponsees,
him and I pulled on my necklace just because I do
right?
that sometimes. He was terrified I was going to pull a cross out. But it's actually just a turtle from
It's a
Hawaii.
turtle.
But I swear, when I was just talking, and I'm just going like this, and he is like, oh no. I just want to make sure that we don't use what is helping us, what we believe in. We're not using that to
No,
hurt anybody.
It's a spiritual program. Again, I emphasize the spiritual aspect. How you and your how,
I do too.
and it even and on step 11, it even says in the program, sought through prayer and meditation to prove our conscious contact with God as we understood Him,
Mm-hmm.
praying knowledge for His will for us and to carry that out. Now, I've heard of female Al-Anons refer to their higher power, she. So it's not, it's your understanding of your higher power. And
That's
that's,
exactly
and
right.
however, it is extremely important, at least for me and my personal, that one does have a higher power. Now, we also do have people who are agnostic or atheist, and
Right,
that's an understand. We do have people in program who are agnostic or atheist,
right.
and they can, yeah, and they, they can deal with it with their, and they'll work with a sponsor who has that same belief. I I I don't know what it is to be agnostic. Even when I was in contention with God
Yes,
in my youth, I still believed that He existed. So I aligned myself with a sponsor who aligned themselves with a higher power in that regard, right? So, but the program is flexible. There's no
I know.
shoulds, you have
I
tos or
know.
whatever, but it's recommended.
I know. Highly.
So exactly. I want to be very conscious of your time. However, I want to know, like, when you wrote the book, let's talk about your book a little bit. And then, again, this is Against All Odds, a desperate plea for human connection. What was what bridge or what gap were you hoping to bridge when you wrote this book?
I wanted to connect trauma survivors, supporters, lay people, and professionals. I tried to make it academic enough to satisfy that side, and I wanted to also explain it in so many ways that I can help people who, mostly people probably, who have family members who are trauma survivors. And one of my pet peeves is like, please do not re traumatize people. So we get comments, they're unbelievable. Most of the time it's like, well, that was 20 years ago, why aren't you over it? Because I wish I could be over it, but because it's still haunting me. But we
Right.
don't have the strength to say that, and that hurts. Or let's just say, I tell people all the time, if somebody comes in with a cane, am I going to give them a chair? Of course I will, right? To sit down while they're waiting. If somebody walks on the street and the car backfires and the guy throws him to the floor, I'm not going to put him on a 50 on 50. I'm most likely going to say, I wonder if he was in war. If somebody comes running in and is pale and whatever and says, my blood sugar is low, am I going to run and get them something? Of course I will.
Right.
When we come in and we say, I have chronic PTSD, and this is going to be difficult for me, can people please listen?
Yeah.
Why argue? What's the point in arguing? I'm not going to argue with a person who comes in and limps. It's just important, and we would do so much good for each other. You know?
Well, I totally agree. I think it's very important for us, especially like a sponsor and sponsee relationship.
Yes.
I need to keep my mouth shut, right? Because in a way, I'm kind of filling that role as a coach, so to speak, right? So it's important for me to listen. And it's
Yes.
also important for me to be honest. Like, I have sponsees that have children. I don't have my own children, right? So it's like I'll recommend them, hey, you know what? If you need to get a second sponsor, right, that has children that could help you on that. I mean, I could give you my opinion, but an opinion as a bachelor who's got no kids, it's like I don't think that really holds water, right?
Mhm.
However, it's like those are those things where you have to be able to, say, yeah, I can help you with this. I can't help you with that. And you got to be able to be flexible enough to listen to what exactly their needs are, I would imagine, right?
I love a comment by Brene Brown, who wrote many books, but one is The Atlas of the Heart. And she actually breaks down the difference between compassion and empathy. But the one sentence that strikes me the most is, listen to me and believe me. Why would I want to add to my story? Are there people out there who do that? Yes, but you can count them on two hands. The majority of people who have complex trauma, none of us want pity. None of us want for other people to carry our burden. But could you just believe me? I mean, I have years and years of like crazy abuse and a lot of sexual abuse.
Mhm.
And a, so to speak, friend said to me, "Oh," she says, "your little molestation." Yeah, I had that too.
That's
It
kind of,
was just
yeah, it's
like,
like how do you discount somebody like that, right?
yeah,
It's like,
dismissive
I
and
mean,
discounting. Don't do that. Or to say to somebody, "What's wrong with you?" That's not what the answer, the question is. Ask and say, "Hey, is there anything that I can do for you right now? What's happening? What would help the most right now?" I mean, you can't imagine a situation, all the situations that I experienced throughout this like district hospital were amazing. But I have yet to meet somebody who wasn't responding much nicer to a compassionate approach. Even the guys
yeah,
who flung around like seven of my security guards.
right,
I would go in there, they were still protecting me, right? And I would say, "Can we just talk? What are we going to talk about? Can I just sit down and talk with you? I'll sit in the door. I'm not going to sit right next to them. The dudes are still trying to watch me."
right.
And just like what happened. Most of the time, that gave a person a moment to regroup and then to look at it and say, "I can't believe I did that," but blah, 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 blah. And to not be judgmental, but believe us. I'm not making anything up.
But what you
Neither are
did there
you.
too is you took a moment to disarm them instead of like coming at them and attacking the individual. It was more
Right.
like it's like you kind of took a moment and said, "What's your biggest problem right now? That's all I want to know."
What is going
Right?
on right now, and how can I be of help?
Exactly. It's like, do I just need to sit here and listen? And the minute, because like a lot of people don't ever have that opportunity, or a lot of people don't even take the opportunity to sit there and say, "What's your biggest problem right now?" Because
Mhm.
they'll ask, like, "How are you doing?" And it's fine. And it's just like, and that's the end of conversation. It's like, no, it's like, you really want to hear what the fuck is going on? Yeah. Tell me what's
Yes.
going on.
Yeah, give
Right?
it to me. Are you
Yeah,
sure?
exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think I can handle it. Exactly, right? So I mean, and I think that's what the art of conversation and the art of being empathetic, not saying, or even sympathetic for that matter. I mean, I might not be able to relate with a specific trauma,
Right?
right? However, I mean, the experiences may be different, but the feelings are the same. I can't
Absolutely.
empathize with you in regards to, for example, if somebody who's been sexually abused, but with somebody, I've been physically abused. However, the feelings and the trauma are still the same,
Very
right? So
similar.
I can sympathize in regards to the trauma, but I can empathize to those feelings of betrayal that went on, especially when it comes to a guardian or something to that effect. So yeah, I agree with that. Man, I was on a roll. I had a question, and this happens every single podcast. It's like I have a really good question, and all of a sudden it just goes poof. Let's see. We were talking about the book. We were talking about bridging the gap of the book. Again, I want to be really conscious of your time. Um, you got any questions? Oh, this was it. We were talking about therapy. This is probably going to be the last question in
Okay.
regards to therapy. You and I were getting into kind of a heated debate on one of our ski trips, and you kind of took a personal. And I could be completely wrong, but we got into a heated discussion in regards to when I said in my book that not all therapists are created equal, and I don't think we ever got to a resolution on that. So I'm just kind of
Oh,
wondering, like,
we're not having a big discussion. I totally agree with you.
oh, okay. All right, cool. Because I don't know. I don't know if it was just the excitement because we were getting close to the
Mm-mm.
mountain or whatnot, but I
Yeah.
just know,
No, no,
you
no.
know. So in that case, I mean, understanding that when it comes to therapy, now I know that you deal with and dealing with post traumatics and trauma, you're going to take longer. But if there was somebody who was just seeking help, just to get, I mean, what kind of recommendations or what kind of especially somebody who's shy, you know because there are those therapists that will just continue to basically drain your wallet, for lack of a better word, right? So if somebody was to come in off the street and they're thinking about therapy, what are some rules or some guidance that you can say in regards to, like, maybe interviewing or selecting a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, when they're seeking help?
So word of mouth is not a bad idea. Asking some other people that you trust actually wouldn't be a bad idea. Many people have want to use their insurance. Go to insurance panels, get their network, take a look at the people, take a look at some of their education and some of their orientation. If anybody asks me and they say, "Can I talk to you?" Absolutely. And I don't charge for that. I'm not going to charge for consultation. I may
Right.
give somebody like 20 minutes and say, "This is what you're going to get." And they're like, "Okay." Oh, I'll keep looking around. Good. Do not stay anywhere where you're uncomfortable. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to blame and shame all the therapists and say they're all like, not doing what they're supposed to do. I've heard a lot of good stories. Um, but I tell people all the time, how long did you stay when that happened, right? Let's say
Mhm.
somebody didn't want to work with them and said, "Yeah, you're too much for me." How long did you stay? I said, "Well, I waited until the session was over." I'm like, "Why?" You just very politely get up and say, "I don't think that works for me." And I think that's absolutely legitimate.
Mhm.
If you go into an Al-Anon or AA meeting, P.S., not all Al-Anon and AA meetings are fantastic.
Or they're not all created equal. I mean,
Yeah,
that's why they
exactly. And
that's
I
why they
tell people,
recommend. All right. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead,
I tell
please. Go
people,
ahead.
find the meeting that works for you.
Exactly. It's recommended that you at least try 6 meetings before, leaving the program. And
Yes,
eventually at some point in time, you'll find somebody. So that's
you will.
great advice. Yeah.
You'll find the match. So I had a young woman who was horribly traumatized, and the guy almost killed her by strangling her, and so her eyes were absolutely bloodshot for weeks. And the doctor in the ER told her that she was seconds away from dying. Young woman.
Mm.
And when they show up in your office and somebody screams at you and says, "Oh, you're too much for me, I can't work with you," that's okay. And the therapist has a right to say that too. But so
Mm.
does the patient.
Right.
I'm like, just, you know what? Find a setting that works for you. Of course, it's going to get challenging, but it has to feel okay. I don't want to dread to go to therapy. Don't dread it. I mean, some work is hard and it's not fun, but make sure you're in a good setting where you're respected, where you have compassion, where the knowledge is there, and I believe on the first session with everybody, if I give them at least a couple of tools, even in a consultation. I'll say, well,
Yeah.
you know what? Here's something that works for me. It works for a lot of other people. because I feel I owe that to them.
Right.
I want to do that, so no, they're not all created equally. I agree with you. We didn't have
Cool.
a heated discussion about that. Must have been
Yeah,
something different.
it must have been another possible. It's just, but it was just really interesting, and like I said, and I think it was probably the excitement of hitting the ski slope. So that was pretty neat. So, um, so let's see. We're at about an hour and 20 minutes now in regards to this. How do people get a hold of you? I want to be respectful of your time, so it's like, I
Yes,
mean,
thank you. And you know what?
yeah.
I don't want to fall asleep on you,
Yeah, exactly. So how do people get a hold of you, and like and where do they get your book and all of
You
that
know
cool
what?
stuff?
I got this like fancy author website,
Uh-huh. Very
and
cool.
I really like it. And I haven't interacted with it a lot yet. I'm
Uh-huh.
still working on some edits for new chapters. I've
Okay.
added a couple of chapters. There's going to be a new edition coming out probably beginning of the year. It's
Okay.
www. Then it's my name, KarolaHauer.com. And
All right.
so
I'll make sure to put those in the show notes. And
that sounds great.
what if somebody wanted to reach out for you for therapy? Is that public information? How do they how
It's
do they
public
get
information. Go to, and you know what? For what I use is Psychology Today. And
Psychology Today?
yeah, in Psychology
And they
Today, a lot of people give like a profile and they talk about what kind of approach they have. So if I were looking for a therapist or for a therapist for a friend in like a certain area,
Mhm.
that's that's one tool that I use.
Great.
It's a
And
good
you could,
tool.
but now you could go say nationwide because obviously you've got technology and you also do remote. Are you using any of those
So as a therapist,
platforms? Right.
I'm licensed in California, so I can only see people who live in California.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
I can
Makes
be
sense.
in Hong Kong, but
Gotcha.
my patients have to be in
In
California.
California. Understood.
I
That's
didn't
awesome.
write the book to get customers.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
I want to educate, and I want to, if I find opportunities to speak, I want to speak. I want to hand that down. What you and I know,
All right.
you have a very good message in your book about the importance of self-help and also 12 step.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate that.
you have a very important message. You have a lot of knowledge, and you need to be out there, and your message needs to be out there. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you, Karola.
oh, I absolutely mean it.
Well, I think we're good. You got anything else for
No,
me? I
I'm
mean,
ready to
yeah.
fall over.
I know I kept you said we could only go 30 minutes, Ben. Here we are at almost 90 minutes. I
That's
love you, Karola. Thank you so much
same here, and I have a
for
lot of
joining me
respect
on
for
this.
you.
I appreciate you.